And welcome back to the Engerati studio here at European Utility Week. I'm joined now by Martin, who's the head of UK Utilities, the utilities sector at Capgemini. Martin, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time in the studio. So I've been watching a bit of output from Capgemini. I was going to say recently, but the thread has been going for some time about a concept definition of a digital utility. At first I thought this is IT/OT convergence, but there is more depth to it in Capgemini's mind anyway, about what a digital utility looks like. If I could ask you, just paint a picture of, what's a digital utility?
Yeah, sure. So in short, digital utilities transformation is about the use of digital technologies to improve performance. That's the top line. When you unpick that, it's about applying those technologies not just to the customer, social media, channels, etc., but also to asset management, analytics to improve decision making, performance management, knowledge management. The reason we're able to do this now probably better than we have done before is really for two main reasons. One is that the technology's moved on. If you tried to do some of this 10 years ago, it would fail. And secondly, attitudes have changed to technology. Consumer uptake of technology is different than it was before, and then hence employees have changed their perception of how they want to use technology. So the time is right for it. Our research with the MIT Institute in Boston highlighted a great performance gain that has been obtained from companies that have really embraced digital. But it also pointed out that utilities companies have been slightly behind the curve, relatively conservative in their uptake of digital. So it's a fantastic opportunity for them.
Because with the utility sector, there's that engineering DNA, and it takes me 10 years to plan something because it's got to last 100 years and that sort of stuff, which is a slightly different mindset to when you're in a more sort of agile sort of digital space. So one of the immediate questions is, how many utilities are actually adopting this philosophy, vision, whatever? And are there any sort of examples, shining examples out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you look across the market, there are one or two that stand out. I'd also say, though, that today, if you walk into a number of the utilities, not just in the UK but globally, you will find digital directors or heads of digital. These roles never used to exist. They exist now. And indeed, certain utilities companies are putting it in their top one or two list of programs.
Right.
I think if you look at British Gas, they've been quite clear on their vision and ambition. And also in Canada, where we're working with some of our clients, are probably some good examples of joining up digital right across the enterprise in the way that I illustrated earlier.
And when these companies do this, sometimes you can get companies to make a leap of faith and say, look, we just got to do this, and we're going to see what happens. But that's not the norm. Normally, businesses are looking for proof points, and they're saying, right, okay, I get it, I can understand the hypothetics around it, but what can I get out of it?
Yeah.
What are some of the real gains and so on? Could you just point to some of those where there's some real figures?
Yeah, again, it's a good question. Here's what's happening in the retail sector, and in fact it's the same across network operators as well. There's a real squeeze on margins. So all of these companies are looking at ways that they can improve their profitability. They're also under pressure to improve customer service. So in the UK, the press has been quite clear about backing consumers and the lack of perceived trust amongst energy suppliers. So there's two main problems there. If you look at some of the statistics of the amount of online traffic that's handled in utility companies, it varies company to company, but in some cases it's as low as 8%. So 8% of transactions are handled via manual processes, by phone calls. That costs money. It's also not what consumers expect. So digital offers that great opportunity of providing better service, different service, but also reducing cost. And that's exactly what's happened in the retail sector and telco sector.
And that whole thing is about so what you're saying is operational efficiencies, communication efficiencies, those alone justify the investment. Is that what you're saying?
Those alone, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. When we look at investment and return on investment business cases, those areas alone are strong enough. But as I said earlier, it extends into asset management, better decision making. Analytics today is much more advanced than it used to be. And when you're running an enormous network, it's very, very difficult to make good management decisions in the short term and the long term and make them cost effective without that information. And that's where analytics is very useful in the asset owner industry.
And on the flip side, obviously, you may go in and say, hey, we're going to do this, and we've written the ROI plan and operational efficiency, knowing when a meter is going to blow and sending out people beforehand and all that sort of stuff covers the bill and then makes us leaner or more efficient. But what are the opportunities? So this is a little bit like, imagine someone's done it. What are the new opportunities that this organization now has that you wouldn't have if you didn't join it all up?
I think, let me take an example of which there are very few that have done this yet, but the convergence of, let's say, smart meter and digital. And really that's about gathering new insights of consumer behaviour and then making that available perhaps to third parties. And that's something that utility companies don't do today. But through the combination of those two things, the new information about consumption, the ability to analyse that, they're going to be able to gather new insights about consumers that will probably be very interesting to other companies.
And would you see that a little bit, and I've heard a similar example before, and I always liken it to when TfL in London opened up their data set of when the buses are going to arrive, and suddenly you had about 20 apps that told you when the bus was going to arrive with various different degrees. Do you see that as a potential opportunity that, because there's all this talk about changing behavior and changing demand and all that side of things, but there's a different skill. There's elements like gamification and things like that need to be put into that in order to change behavior. And we're talking about behavior change. Can you see a situation whereby a utility says, okay, we'll have an open data model. We don't have the resources to get in the gamification experts as well. Let the market decide which app wins in terms of being able to do that.
Well, so DEC have stated that that's one of the things they'd like to see happen anyway in the UK. It already happens in the States.
Right.
So there are multiple apps available that consumers can use to manage energy. Behaviour change is complex, and in our presentation today we talked about 5 building blocks. It's very much about education, knowledge, the tools, the enablement of being able to save energy. Policy making has to be part of it as well, and I think where we stand in the UK, you could argue that it's a little bit difficult to be able to reduce your energy consumption as much as you might with the retail market reform restricting number of tariffs.
Right.
And then central to that is being able to understand your customers better. What you offer to one customer or what you communicate to one customer might have a very different impact on a separate segment. So it's tricky, There are psychologists involved in all of this, and I don't think
Social
anybody's really got it right. Exactly right.
That whole gamut.
Yeah.
So we're kind of coming to the end of our time in the studio here today, and let me ask you one final question, which is, I understand why, but I would imagine it's a fine line to balance, because a utility is in the business of selling energy.
Mm-hmm.
Normal business thought tells you that if you've got a product to sell as much of it at the highest price you can possibly get.
Yep.
And just keep going.
Yep.
That is kind of diametrically opposite to some of the other conversations where actually you're saying, oh, we can't use, or we shouldn't use that much of this. How are they balancing these two things out? Are utilities internally schizophrenic?
The market has changed, and it's going to change rapidly. The value of European utilities today is worth $500 billion less than it was 10 years ago.
Report.
Fantastic report. And you only have to read that to realise that economic changes happen all the time. It's the utility's job to change its strategy to adapt to the environment it's in. The environment it's in is that you have renewables, you have micro-generation. The game's changed now, and that's the thing they've got to work out, because for sure we can't carry on consuming energy at a greater and greater rate.
Right. On that big
bombshell,
we're going to finish off, and thanks for joining us in the studio. Thank you as well for watching, and we're going to try and get some of those assets, and certainly the presentation that Martin talked about. There will be some very obvious link next to this video, and you can go ahead and watch that as well. Thank you again for watching, and thanks again, Martin.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, thanks.